Morning, everyone, to the SAP Enable Now deployment overview for consultants. First of all, if you don't want your face, your name, your questions, or your voice being visible to others, since this meeting is being recorded, please disconnect now. Okay, guys, as always, questions are allowed at any time. What we're going to talk about today is the new Enable Now deployment services framework, just called in short SAP Enable Now deployment. So from now on, if we talk about SAP Enable Now deployment, we're going to talk about the services that we offer regarding our beautiful tool. Again, questions please at any time. It's all fresh from the press. You are actually the first group that we're going to present this to. Any feedback is very, very welcome. This all will only grow if you work together with us to make this whole thing a success. So let's see. My recording works. What are we going to do? Introduce the new service structure and the general idea of the methodology. Then we're gonna compare standard services versus the service phases and the modules that we talk about, just to give you an idea of the hierarchies that we invented, etc. Then we're going to go into details, look into the single service phases in detail, compare the single service phases with the existing services that you all might have delivered once, like Smart Starts or however they were called in the single regions. Then we're going to have a closer look to the accelerators, to the tools and the documents and everything that we are creating to support you in your daily work. And then we have plenty of time for Q&A and for your valued feedback. All right. That's what we're going to do. The session originally was planned for 4 hours. I'm not sure whether we're going to need the whole time or not. Let's see. Depends a bit on your participation. As always. Okie dokie. So let's get ahead. SAP Enable Now deployment. Why do we do all this?
Good morning.
Good morning, whoever said good morning, but I'm going to mute you all now. So now you're all muted. If you want to ask a question, please unmute yourself again. Otherwise, we have too much background noise for my taste. Okay, SAP Enable Now deployment. So why did we do all this? First of all, to optimize existing service offerings based on the experiences of the last year. I held a handful of interviews with consultants from all the regions regarding the existing standard service offerings and where they saw potential for optimization. It was basically all about the sequentiality of the services, like you have to do this workshop after that workshop and this workshop after that workshop, which didn't work out in real projects because we haven't been agile enough to really fulfill the requirements and the specific scopes of the single customer companies. So now we got a bit more flexibility here. That's one thing. Another thing is the lack of volume. So we have more days for the standard services now, etc. This is, from my perspective, the most important change. The biggest source of escalations in service context have been consultants sitting on the bench for the first couple of days because the complete ecosystem of the customer hasn't been prepared at all for what comes up. Yeah, so they weren't aware what Enable Now will, or on which areas of their ecosystem from a technological and from a organizational perspective Enable Now will have impact on. And to get this gap closed, we implemented a preparation phase, which is mandatory from now on and is going to be delivered remotely. The deliverables And the accelerators, the slide decks, therefore are already final and available, and I'm going to show you those in detail. I believe this will be a big difference. So we have this mandatory remote portion of the service, which is crisp, short webinars and web sessions, but they are mandatory to be held 2 weeks in prior of the first on-site day to give the customers infrastructure team, especially technologically, the chance to prepare themselves for what comes up and avoid any, we did not know what to do, so we're not going to pay you discussions in the future. Another big one is that the separation between conceptual and technical work took place. In the more sequence-driven services that we had so far, it was always pretended that Enable Now deployment or Enable Now implementations are one-man shows. So we had to have resources that were able to cover both the conceptual portion of it and the pure technological portion of it, because that's simply not the case in most of the regions. We had to separate this from each other, so the technical implementation runs in parallel to the sequential conceptual portion of the services to be able, in case the single resource is not able to cover both, in such cases to split and have the technical portion delivered, so the pure manager installation, let's say, the web assistant configurations in the back ends, the identity management configurations, all the pure techie Windows administrator related stuff supposed to be delivered by a resource that is accordingly trained and is controlled by the conceptual consultant. I'm going to go into details here as soon as we get there. Defining parts of the service to be delivered remotely. Yes, we increased the remote ratio within the service. So there are phases that can be delivered remotely easily, but there are phases where we still recommend to deliver on site. We try to compress the on-site time to reduce travel effort and get blocks of, let's say, 4.5 or 5 days being delivered in one run. With proper preparation, that shouldn't be an issue. But that's also something which is more related to the single region. So I believe in the German-speaking area, for instance, we don't have any issues with traveling to the customer more than once. In North America, where the consultant probably lives in Arkansas and has to travel to California, that could be a challenge. Standardizing, this is my personal big one. I want the wording being standardized. I want the complete methodology being standardized, because there were so many variations of things around that we really have to work on this, because support department simply hasn't been able to follow. So they didn't know what what consultants spoke about when they came from a specific region where wording was changed, etc. So we have to standardize our wording throughout all the documentation. So I'm going to work with product management from now on to standardize everything, starting from the service, moving back to the SEN courses, to have a really standardized and homogeneous wording and methodology approach throughout all materials that are Enable Now related. Another part of the coming from the motivation side of it is the modularization. So we want to have a toolbox of services and a standardized toolkit per module within within this toolbox to be able to easily create customer-specific and tailored services without having to invent the wheel again and again and again. Yeah, you're going to see that in a second. This is where we're going to start. I'm going to guide you through the idea of phases and modules, and bringing modules back into a sequential order that we're going to call a service then. Yeah, that's just for the sake of flexibility. Standard service packages based on the above, that's what I just said. That will be the majority of things that you are going to deliver on midterm. Yeah, so the standard services are for new brand new greenfield implementations of Enable Now, and then we're going to have add-on services. Easiest thinkable would be just time and material on top, but basically other modules that are well described that can be shipped to the customer after the initial implementation has taken place. And then finally, and that might be the one that you were looking for from a consulting perspective, is the fact that the single consultant was strictly caged into the sequentiality. That was at least the major feedback that I received within the interviews. You had to do this A, B, C, D, E. And even if it didn't fit, you still did A, B, C, D, E, because that was the ask. And now I believe we are a bit more flexible. And there, at that point, I'm really looking forward your feedback and your input regarding the new approach. So, however, we are early. It's August, and this is what I just want to mention in the very beginning. We are not where we wanted to be. Yeah, so especially regarding the delivery documents, like the slide decks I want to provide for you, the DKP examples, the tree and structure examples, etc. We are definitely not as far as we wanted to be. Yeah, so there are delivery documents in place already, and they will grow fast. The complete team of Enable Now champions is basically working on that, but part-time. Yeah, so they are all regular consultants on site having customer jobs. So we cannot spend 100% of our resources here. So please be still a bit patient. As you will see throughout the next hours, is that there are still gaps. Yeah, so and there we just have to rely on your input, where is the most pain, where we have to fill the gaps more fast, which could still wait till autumn. However, the plan is to have the final set per module ready by end of the year, and then starting to create the delivery documents for the lifecycle services that come later, beginning of 2020. All right, any questions so far? Otherwise, I'm going to proceed. Now I see that the room is actually full. Now we got everybody that booked. All right, very good. So, Enable Now deployment. So what's the idea? Well, that's just a summary. I just added this slide because it's the major slide, that starting slide for the sales documentation. So the sales guys will use this as a starting point, and to show you our new beautiful icons. Product management was so gentle to help us creating a image library for the service. So we're going to go through phases now, and that's on the right hand side. You see this the iconographics for the single phase. So we're going to identify where we are quite easily based on that. Yeah, but that's basically just look and feel. Major service areas, bullet list. I don't have to read it for you. You can read it on your own. All the slides that you see today, you will have access to in a jam room that I'm going to present at the very end of the session. Okay, so what we talk about: preparing the customer properly, technologically implement Enable Now, conceptually and organizationally implement Enable Now, creating a valuable and long-term sustainable EPSS strategy together with the customer, executing the customization, major part of it as always, a training, which we are not allowed to say anymore. So the official new wording within SAP is enablement. So I have to change that, took note already. So there is no training anymore, for what reason ever, it's enablement now. Long-term sustainability services. This is one thing that I'm going to talk about a bit more intense, rather at the end of the session. Yeah, so what we have to change is our mindset from a consulting perspective. It's not getting in, delivering X days, getting out and disappear. What I'm asking for is creating a trust relationship to the customer and staying. And being the one trusted advisor for knowledge management and e-learning with Enable Now within the ecosystem of a customer. And I believe that we will provide tools that enable you to do so better than before, at least. And the famous content factory services, which are for now more or less out of scope still. Okie dokie. So let's see. we start from the bottom, no, from the top to the bottom, I'm actually not sure. The black box that I see where your names are in, is this a gray box that disturbs you, or don't you actually see that? Where my mouse pointer is now. Is there something from your perspective, or is there nothing? If one could just answer me that.
Yes, so the black boxes, we do see it. It does take away a bit of the screen.
Then
it can be minimized, I think. It can be minimized.
I'm just moving it to my secondary screen. I was just curious.
It's okay. We can minimize it now. We don't.
Can move it.
Yeah, you can move it.
We can individually move it. I don't have to
move it. Now it's moved, and now you see everything. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Structure-wise, that's a bit of an academic one. Yeah, but that's the starting point. What we talk about is we have 4 sequential phases, and there is not that much of a difference if we compare with the smart starts and the other standard services that we had before. We have a preparation phase, which is brand new and mandatory and will create value. I'm 100% sure. This is the initialization of the strategy and configuration phase. This is where the majority of the work is done from a conceptual consulting perspective. All the configurations, all the technological enhancements, the strategy workshop as a starting point, everything like this is starting here, ending with a defined pack of deliverables like an authoring guideline, like checklists, etc. that kick off the enablement phase, where the authoring team or the authoring teams are being trained, and then we end up in the coaching and lifecycle phase, where we always have some kind of a recommended coaching budget, which you can consider as a buffer. But however, this is the 4 sequential phases, and in parallel to all those 4 sequential phases, the technical implementation takes place, being kicked off basically in the middle of the preparation phase, not in the very beginning. So this is just for graphical reasons that it starts simultaneously here, but you're gonna understand in a second. So those phases are mandatory. So from any perspective, from a color scheme perspective, from a subject matter perspective, we see where we are, yeah, and where we got to focus on. Probably that even already that makes life easier. The phases, they are split in so-called modules. Let's take the strategy and configuration phase as an example. We got those 4 modules within the strategy and configuration phase. The strategy workshop as such, which is well described with a specific scope, specific audience, min-max duration, and comes with a consultant toolkit. And that's the same for all the other modules within that phase. And out of those modules, we recombine specific standard services that are scoped for a specific type of customer and project situation. Okay, so phases, modules, and modules become services again, and most likely the main part of what you are going to deliver will be one of those 4 standard services that we're gonna go into detail now as a starting point. Any questions so far? You don't want to talk to me, it's too early for you guys, right?
It's all good. So far, it's all clear.
All right, so service phases. The preparation phase, mandatory. Yeah, I'm going to repeat that as soon as the first of you says, now we got it, Mike, shut up. Yeah, because I really want this to be done. Yeah, because that's where all the pain came from, at least from my perspective. I want this to happen. The mandatory preparation sessions are to guarantee a smooth project course, let's call it. Yeah, so basically make the customer organization aware what they need, because they never knew. They knew in parts, but in some situations, especially in regions which are a bit far away from the core teams here, that was not known. Yeah, so hey, yeah, now we need to do identity management, and now we need to talk about corporate design. Yeah, and the customer project manager said, "What the hell? Yeah, how should I get those resources to our table now on short term?" And this led to instant confusion and didn't meet the customer's expectations, and this is what we want to compensate with the implementation of this preparation phase. Yeah, so trigger the necessary preparation actions on customer side and hand over a stack of documents. One other big change: there is no limitation anymore regarding handing over materials. Yeah, this complete IP discussion is off the table. Everything you get as a PDF, at least, is to be handed over to the customer. Yeah, so nothing will stay. Everything will find its way to the customer teams to really create valuable know-how transfer, and not just reading slides and then taking them away with us again. So in parallel to this, the pure technical implementation takes place, absolutely depending on the skill set of the single consultant. That's one thing that you / your project manager or your sales partner at SAP together with you have to decide whether you have that skill set or not. And within the internal consulting database, we're going to tag the single people based on that self-estimation, let's say. Yeah, but that's basically one big change. This is the conceptual stream, which is sequential on the bottom, and then we have the technical implementation running in parallel, where all those nasty things like identity management, SAML, provider configuration, and cloud security consulting and all this takes place. And we're going to talk about handovers here in a second. And as soon as we know how this procedure will look like in detail, I will post the how-tos and how to trigger the corresponding technical resource, how to get access to that single person if you want to use SAP internal resources for that purpose, how to get access into the jam group. Yeah? So right now, this is still a blind spot. However, if you are from a partner company having several resources and you want to internally use your well-trained technical guy for that purpose, but have like 3 conceptual consultants or 3 trainers and 1 technical person, you may play that game internally in your company as well. Same approach. The dashed ones, they are at least recommended to be delivered remotely. For the preparation, this is mandatorily remote. You're going to see in a second when we go into details here. For the technical implementation, that depends. If you are in a high secure environment, like a big insurance or military or defense sector or whatever, they will not let you implement a piece of software remotely in any case. So you will have to travel. But from a recommendation perspective, the technical implementation is recommended to be delivered as remote sessions as well. Bracket, because Enable Now is not rocket science to implement technically, basically. Yeah? So at least manager and all the network related things, they are quite easy to do. So if a well-trained customer administrator is guided into the right direction, usually they can do that on their own. Things become a bit more complex as soon as Web Assistant is in place, but nevertheless, recommendation for the technical portion is remote. Strategy and configuration phase, the heart of it, the core phase of our service, is still recommended to be delivered on premise in blocks, block and tailoring of the service we're going to see in a second. So what's this? The strategy workshop. Some regions still, including Germany, still called that workshop scoping workshop, basically. So we're going to get rid of that name, unfortunately, because there is a new naming convention internally that says that scoping sounds pre-sales, and within a service there should not be any pre-sales action to take. So what was scoping workshop before is now a strategy workshop, but from a runtime perspective, it's still the same what happens there. I'm going to show you the deck that I prepared for you for the strategy workshop later as well. I believe that's kind of a beauty. So team organization and role definition, for sure, the complete organizational impact. How do we get the right content to the right person? How do we orchestrate and organize our production and the long-term maintenance of our content? No, all this takes place in that phase, the customizing, the design, the information architecture. How do we build our work areas, our trees? Why do we do that? Why does it make sense in a way that we that we recommend, etc. All the infrastructure designs, the refinements. Do we need mirrors of servers somewhere on the planet? Is there a target audience on the moon that we have to provide content to somehow? All the workflows, the roles, the metadata schema, everything. That was the heart of the Smart Start service. Now takes place in the so-called strategy and configuration phase. Yeah, but that shouldn't be something new. Based on the outcome of the strategy and configuration phase, we move forward to the enablement phase. We started tailoring specific blocks here. So what I would suggest, and this is again something where I need your input and your opinions, is that we step away from the SEN 100, 200, 300 modularization and create our own within the service, because that's not reality. Yeah, so there is no SEN 200 person usually, yeah, that really has the full skill set. What we did was having another terminology in here, that's standard author, master author / project manager, which combines all the more strategic features of the solution. And then we have specialists, especially two, the EPSS and the book page specialist here, that is trained on parts of the SEN 100 and 200 courses, specifically for the sake of their special role, like this instructional designer creating nice looking templates and curricula, is not at all interested in recording SAP applications. Yeah, these guys have no idea about IT simulations. They should not be bothered with that. And the same for the EPSS person. Yeah, so if you are able to implement real-time help objects into the daily business of your target audience, you probably might not be the same person that administers the complete content. So we have to be a bit more precise here, and based on that, we changed the modularization of the trainings, which we are not allowed to call trainings anymore. So this, therefore, we call them enablement workshops. So this all is based on the outcome of the strategy and configuration phase. The primary definitions are made in the strategy workshop, but I believe that this is the way that you all worked so far anyway. And then we end up in the life cycle and configuration phase, in the coaching and life cycle phase, sorry, where we're going to wrap the whole thing up. There is that one workshop that finalizes or finishes the service. After the enablement phase, final modifications on authoring guidelines and on configurations will be done, but that's that one buffer day that you need anyway. Yeah, and because we wanted to keep that sequentiality up, this is the one workshop that already belongs to the last orange colored phase. But then we have the lifecycle services, and there we will offer add-on packages, well-defined packages, beside the option to have time and material, for sure, like collaborative lighthouse projects, yeah, collaborative content production with lighthouse character, project managers coachings, etc. Yeah, SCORM workshops, LMS validation workshops. This is what we're going to offer here, but we're going to go into detail there later as well. So same thing again. Other visual, use those as you prefer. Prep, technical implementation strategy. This comes together with a min-max duration. Basically, this is recommendations. You will not know. Yeah, so saying that the strategy and configuration phase could get up to 12 days. Yes, that depends for sure. It depends on the complexity of the customer as such, of the customer's ecosystem, of the customer's infrastructure, whether the customer is a global player and we are implementing Enable Now as a very strategic solution within their knowledge management strategy, or if it's just in brackets just, which is still the majority, a project-driven approach, where we have to have the documentation for the new system XYZ ready by end of next week. Yeah, total different stories, but the separation of those total different stories we're gonna have a closer look to in a second as well. Enablement, I'm just having the chat brought up. Oh, David Brewster, in my experience, there is no separation of standard authors, EPSS and book page specialist. Yep, depends. I mean, you still can train all in one run, but as soon as you end up in a high scale infrastructure where you have not only that one team or that one-man show, my experience at least is different, that there are people that have different duties within the project. And based on the packages created, I believe we're going to have all possibilities to serve all of the types of customer situations. So enablement, just talked about, depending on group size and team sizes, etc. The coaching, which is always a recommended pack of 5 days that we recommend in any service. Yeah. Hope dies last, German saying. If we got those 5 days, we have 5 more days of 5 more days to spend and a bit of buffer. I usually have those 4-hour jour fixe based blocks at the end of the service that I usually schedule together with the customer team, like every 2 weeks, bi-weekly Fridays, half a day, Q&A for your authoring team, review what you've done so far, check the content for quality, give advice, give some input regarding didactical or media didactical quality, etc. Yeah, and talk about open questions that probably came up while or in the context of the first production phase. And then the lifecycle services, which haven't been discussed, duration is per module. So we're going to have by end of the year or beginning of next year, the latest, we're going to have specific package descriptions and delivery documents for the mentioned ones here. Besides the team coaching, like health check, business assessment, that's the ones that we're going to use as regular service packs, short, crisp ones, 1 up to 2 days, where that one consultant comes back to the customer on a regular basis to keep the foot into the door and play the role of the trusted advisor and see what happens actually with Enable Now, and especially trying to broaden the scope of Enable Now and broaden the footprint of Enable Now within the customer ecosystem. Yeah, and then the common ones, solution manager integration, update workshops, additional EPSS strategy sessions, SCORM LMS. I mentioned them all. We're going to come back later to the life cycle anyway, but as mentioned, this is still just a plan, but not yet in place. So here we go. SAP Enable Now deployment, the standard services. As we've seen before, there is the single phases. The phases are split into modules, and the modules, they are then again recombined into standard services. And we have 4 standard services defined so far. They have all specific purposes, and in the material section that you are going to have access to after this session, you will find detailed decks per standard service where specific in-scope and out-scope lists are presented. And that's one big thing that I want to mention before we go into details here for the standard services. One big issue that we had in the past was that the scope wasn't set precisely. Yeah, so one of your big duties in the new service framework that we discuss here is expectations management from the very beginning to avoid such hiccups. If you want to create a service for a standard Enable Now implementation within 15 days, you will not be able to cover each feature of the solution. For sure not. This will not fit. Yeah, you will probably not be able to implement all the EPSS capabilities, integrate the customer structure with the BPM system, and train 5 different teams of authors. This will not happen. So we're going to set the scope precisely. Yeah? And that's one intention of the standard services. this is what you need, this is what you get, but then you have a list of things that you won't get if you buy that service. Important part of it. So please do yourself a favor in the post work based on the session today. Do yourself a favor and read those in-scope, out-scopes and point to them as soon as you start the service. You purchased a 5-day service package, and the first thing that the customer asks is, how do I use text-to-speech with Google Voices to dub my high-end multimedia courses? That's a no-go situation. Sorry, sir. This is not part of that service. Yeah, we are going to implement Enable Now technically now, and if you are interested in high-end features, please be patient, and then we have to add another day, or you go to Info Center and get your information on your own. Yeah, we need to focus, and that's one of the major major things within the standard services. So let's see. Standard service deploy SAP Enable Now Core. What's that about? Core means no EPSS, no web, no desktop assistant. The service is tailored in a way as presented, and the flow on the bottom is a recommendation. Yeah? This is how you could package your days within a time frame of 6 weeks, and to get this done properly, remote and on-premise or on-site portions are divided to each other. And guys, if you have questions, do me a favor. Would you just unmute yourself and talk to me, because I can't look parallel to the deck and the chat in parallel all the time. So maybe I miss something if we don't talk, and I believe talking is the better way anyway.
Yeah, we just got a private chat with David Bristol. So
So David asked, should pre-sales not doing the scoping for us? Yeah, they are. To a certain extent, you will see phase 0 in a second. As soon as we go into details, there is a handover procedure which is predefined. There is checklists that I provide, but it depends on the region. Yeah, we will not be able to force the pre-sales guys to do that. But the qualification as such should be done by pre-sales. And if you're patient for another 30 minutes, you will see what we got, and then we can talk about that in detail, Dave. Okay. So standard services, deploy Enable Now Core. Let's just quickly toggle. Yeah, I'm going one slide forward. There is another one, Core and EPSS, where we always resolve the acronym EPSS down here. And you see the difference. There's just like 20 average and 50 mandatory days. And the Core comes without EPSS. Yeah, that could be the starting point, and this is actually what we do. That's the classical smart start without desktop and web assisted, with a bit more air to breathe, and I believe sorted a bit differently to be able to guarantee that in the core block here, strategy and configuration, everything works smoothly. So we have the technical implementation for sure, physical stuff in Cloud Edition, just 1 day. The difference, cloud on premise would always be 1 day on top for the technical implementation. For the physical manager installation and configuration, for instance. But still, we have a technical portion to do in cloud, consulting people on what the clients do, how the clients are downloaded, what we have to do from a security perspective to get the clients up and running properly. All this is in here. The preparation starts with a block called infrastructure overview. That's the briefing session for the customer IT department and support department, which is usually the department that will take over internal support for the solution after a certain period of time. So they need to know what they actually purchased and what they are, what the duties are in that context, and what they have to prepare. And then we recommend another block. I called it Core Team Kickoff, which is the same thing, just preparing the team or preparing the project manager on what resources he or she needs to bring up to the table for the following phases, but more from a business perspective. So we have the technological preparation and we have the business-related preparation, and this supposed to, and this is how the service descriptions and the SOWs are tailored, the statements of work, that needs to take place with a minimum of 1 week in between to enable the customer person to trigger the right actions and to get access to the right resources before we start the strategy phase of our service. Strategy and configuration phase, that one workshop, which is maybe a day, maybe less, maybe more. That's just recommendations here. And that just fluently initiates 3 parallel work streams we're going to work on: the customizing and design, everything around templates, everything around skins, everything around default settings and other customizations. The information architecture stream, from my personal point of view, the most important one. How the trees, the structures, the meta informations are stored. How will we guarantee long-term sustainability of our knowledge management system? How do we tailor the single outputs of everything to guarantee that the right person receives the right content in the right time, etc. All this happens in the middle stream, and then we have another stream called infrastructure and technology, where we talk about role mapping, where we talk about technical workflows, yeah, where we probably talk about server infrastructure again after the initial technical implementation was done. And here you might take advantage of our technical experts as well that are intended to deliver the technical implementation portion. So that's the 3 streams that more or less run in parallel, and depending on the complexity of their of the customer's project, and this could just happen in a series of workshops that are not strictly separated from each other. No, you will probably not be able to clearly state, now strategy workshop is over and now we're going to start working on the customization. Maybe the strategy workshop as such is something that takes 5 days, a whole week, and you just work together for 5 days on the 3 different streams. However, there is a set of handovers defined, of deliverables defined, that are handed over in a final workshop, and there are mandatory parts in there and there are optional parts in there, but we're going to go into detail in a second. Okay, and then based on that, the outcome of that, we're going to train our authors. In that particular service, we have the standard and the master author training over all 5 days. There's no difference. There is always a recommended portion of classroom style training. For the standard author, it's 1 day and 2 days, and then another day where we have a recommended collaborative content production portion. So what was called a collaborative build workshop, I believe, in the Smart Start, is now rather related or connected to the enablement, because then we have the people in the room, etc. Same for other enablement blocks, and then we wrap the whole thing up, finalize the service, and initiate the coaching phase, where the statements of work currently say that the customer is able to take this in 4-hour portions to make your life easier and your life plannable. Yeah, so if you have like 2 active customers, you can fill a whole workday with 2 4-hour blocks of coaching per customer, for instance. I believe that will work, but you see, yeah, it's not far away from what we had so far. It just looks a bit different. Okay, the next one, just to compare again, technical implementation takes longer if we add EPSS to the menu, for sure. We need more time here, especially for infrastructure and technology. It's not 6, it's 8 now. And we have another block of training. So 5 days of enablement now become 7 because we have the EPSS specialist training here. Same approach here, 1 day classroom, 1 day collaborative production, which is highly recommended for the EPSS portion, especially for desktop assistant, if you want to implement this properly, you will have to hold hands in the very beginning a bit. Same thing at the end, wrap up and coaching. So same thing, but a complete day count of 20 within a time range of 7 weeks. Just going back and compare, it's 15 within a time frame of 6, and you see the differences here.
So you've also got another day of technical implementation there as well.
Wait a second, I'm just realizing that I don't have you on my headset. Where's that? So say it again, Dave, please.
You have another day of technical implementation.
Say it again.
2 days of technical implementation.
Yes, for EPSS in comparison with Core, where we only have the manager to install basically and discuss a bit of the client technology, where 1 day should be sufficient. And so for EPSS, we always add 1 day of technical implementation in general.
Yeah, they've got in your week 1 still half a day there at the bottom.
Okay, that's wrong. Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go ahead. The next one. I believe in the Smart Start world, if there was a price sensitive customer in place, what was sold was called fundamentals, and this pack was a more or less 5-day pack as well, and it was focused on training in a more or less unconfigured system. We believe that this should be changed, and this is why we did it, why we changed it. The Explore Enable Now service focuses on strategy and configuration in a very compact way, just a 4-day package, but ending up in a system that fits to the scope and the requirement of the single customer. And then we send the customer's production teams to Learning Hub. And make them enable themselves there. Yeah, so that's the big difference. So the focus of the very crisp and standardized 5-day pack moves away from enablement rather into the strategy and configuration piece. Let's see if this works out. My gut feeling says that it makes more sense, but let's see. We have everything in Learning Hub, so self-enablement is a definite option, and nevertheless, even in this service, we recommend a 5-day coaching block being delivered in 4-hour blocks again, where continuous knowledge transfer could take place. So I believe a customer that's implemented that way, most of the training, let's say the enablement, will take place in the coaching phase, always like Q&A style. But the focus just changed, and for Explore we have the cloud edition and the desktop edition as well. The technical implementation is just half the budget, simply because we just keep it very strict and standardized and checklist driven. Right? Implemented, manager up and running, yes, period. The story ends there. From my perspective, Explore should be a starting point for customers where Enable Now was bundled in and they have actually not that much of an idea what they have to do, or what they want to do with it. So the try out customer kind. So we're going to see. That's the minimum set that we should offer. And again, it's from, at least from my personal point of view, it's wiser to spend this minimum budget in a strategy discussion to see what you could do if you would do it properly, rather than training authors in recording dumb simulations, which they won't do anyway, because they have no idea what this will do in their ecosystem. So however, that's Explore, and then at the end we have Deploy Web Assistant as the 4th standard service, which is intended to be a pure web EPSS implementation that comes with crisp 9 days. Why is that? Simply because we have to compete, and there is the WalkMes of the world, all those web EPSS focused solutions that cannot do more than that. Web EPSS, and if we want to compete here from a technological perspective, we can for sure, but from a services perspective, we need to have something similar as well. And here we need to take care. The scope is ultra limited. Yeah, we deploy Web Assistant. We don't deploy Enable Now. That's not a full scope implementation. We train people on how to fill a Web Assistant with proper content. Yeah? But they will have no clue about handbooks. They will not have a clue about knowledge management on a larger scale. They will not have a clue about high-end multimedia-driven book pages and animations and all that. They will simply be able to fill their Web Assistant with content in a proper way. So that's what this service is focusing on. And one thing which we could expect here is basically that the discussions around the scope will be one of the major discussions that you will have in that service. Yeah, but again, this is strictly focusing on the feature set that the other web EPSS tools offer, and all the beauty that Enable Now offers in parallel can be mentioned to broaden the scope again, yeah, but is not part of that package. So then again, that table-wise, just to see cloud on-prem differences, you see the only difference that takes place here on-premise cloud is the upper technical portion, where we simply add a day or half a day to the on-premise to get on-premise related things done. But the rest is the same. So we have deploy Enable Now with either 15 or 16 plus 5 recommended. We have deploy core and EPSS with 20 or 21 plus 5 recommended. We have explore with 5 or 5.5 maybe. This separation is not even necessary. And we have deploy web assistant with either 9 or 10 days. Okay, so what's your thinking so far?
Looks good.
Looks good.
Yeah, I like the separation of the technical implementation part. I'm concerned that a lot of customers, particularly in the UK, will kind of push back on a number of days because even now with 12 and 16 days, they say, no, that's too many.
Yeah.
So that's, but I like it.
Yeah, that's the point where we have to be a bit more strict in regards of expectation management.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, and there we will have the listings, and that's a pre-sales discussion. Yeah, so this is what we want to force pre-sales to do. Saying, okay, if you only want to spend this amount of days, this is what you get, and this is what you definitely don't get. So we have exclude lists in there. Yeah, and then we as consultants simply have to be a bit more strict and say, no, I will not talk with you about business process management now and about test integration, because that's not in the scope, and we will not get our job done if we're going to broaden the scope without adding days. Yeah. And that's probably a lesson that we all have to learn, that we need to be more strict here and not just follow the requirements of the customer and spend our nights to fulfill those.
All right. Hello, Fritz. This is Halinka speaking from Belgium. In fact, in my experience, because we do a lot of big customers, big SAP implementations, and then adding Enable Now with even these type of mandates does get accepted, or could be accepted for sure. Mm-hmm. So we also join it, maybe it's an idea for others. We package it together with change management consulting.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we are on the training track involved as well from a change management consulting perspective, but then we also will do the setup, etc. for Enable Now. And when you can, make the rest of the deal bigger, these mandates do not sound like a lot.
Absolutely, yeah, fully agree. If you are in a project, sorry.
Yeah, and in this case, the revenue is distributed also correctly, because change management services are not offered by education. They're coming to, let's say, consulting sales back. But because a few years ago we had a, let's say, collision with these consultants, right? So we need to prepare 2 separate agreements.
Yeah, that's a SAP internal issue.
Yes, yes. So that's why I'm asking. Like, it looks like in Belgium they managed to get this working. So I'm asking if they still need to prepare separate agreements and
Okay.
if they struggle internally, or it's fine.
Was that a question for me, for Halinka from Belgium?
Yes.
I didn't quite get the question. So, of course, I'm part of a partner. I'm not part of SAP itself. And we sell on the Belgian market SAP implementations.
Yeah.
In general, bigger. With
for you,
one part,
for
so
you,
functional consultancy, technical consultancy, development consultancy, but then also within our change management track, we want to add more and more the SAP Enable Now part. And in that case, when of course this is just part of a bigger project that gets sold, these mandates are okay.
Yeah, so nice to know that you're more flexible than SAP.
Yeah. Most are. Yeah, but coming back to the counts, I believe that it's value for money, and that it's not that much if it's seen in the context of a strategy either, or of a bigger implementation project. If it's seen standalone, sometimes there is more. That was what David said. I believe it's always it's always related to the starting points. From where are you coming from, and what's the intention of usage? And if you're within a project, usually this is just like being calculated in and easily sold. Yeah, but if you say we just purchased Enable Now, but we are not pretty much sure what we're going to do with it, but it's cool somehow, but we don't have a use case, then I personally would always try to focus on explore to get this done.
Yes,
So
yes,
let's
definitely.
try to understand what this beauty of a software can do for you in your particular world. Yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, even if you just show a few things at a customer who's busy with a SAP implementation, I mean, within that strategy workshop, already people start thinking, oh, let's use it for this or that other project that's upcoming. I mean, that's a fact. So indeed, if you can sell it separately, just sell the 5 days, it will sell itself, I'm convinced. After that. That's true.
I guess we are just talking about beautiness. So this is really beautiful here, because when I remember every Enable Now consultant in the world did the implementation with their own methodology and with their own tools. So everybody did whatever the consultant wanted or not. And if there was an issue later coming to the support, nobody had a clue based on which implementation methodology this was used. So this is really more than welcome, and was really required and is really required to do a proper quality implementation in future in the whole world. So this is really amazing what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So any further? Otherwise, I would suggest, because I run out of fresh coffee, that we're gonna grab a coffee now and take a quick break because it's early in the morning. I'm going to pause the recording now and let's give us 10 minutes and we're gonna proceed at 10:15 if that's okay for all.
Yep, sure.
Okay.
So we are back. The packages, we circle back to the packages after we had a look to the single phases and the single modules in detail. Nevertheless, the pre-sales portion of it is as important as the others. So customer qualification, standard service versus customized service. And the education pre-sales teams will focus on the standard services for sure. I mean, they have like X hundred services on their menu, so they will not be able to go into that many details. So one of the 4 standard services will for sure be the sales focus. We have with the 15 or the 20-day packages, we have enough air to breathe to really do proper things in there. And if the customer scope and complexity doesn't match with the scope of the standard services, in that case, we will be able to tailor custom services based on our toolkit more easy than we've been before. So pre-sales, that's what this slide says. Let's see. I believe this is depending on the region. We'll qualify the customer's requirements beforehand, preferably choose one of the pre-built standard services from the package, one of the 4 or 8 if we compare on-prem and cloud. And if the scope and complexity will not match, we're gonna go to the right box called custom service. And the qualification should be handed over to the education services team in a standardized way. There is checklists in place already where I'm really looking forward your feedback and the pre-sales colleagues' feedback if this is manageable or not. Quick decision tree for the qualification. It's a starting point. Soon we're going to have a service calculator on Excel base that could be a starting point for pre-sales. There is work in progress right now. One big differentiator regarding the service to be offered is the way that the customer is actually intending to use Enable Now. Yeah? So there is a prospect interested in Enable Now, and the first question to ask would always be, is this a project-driven implementation? We need to have enablement material for our new CRM system for a target audience of 1,000 people ready by end of the month. Or we implement S/4HANA and we want this new system being fully documented by end of the year. That's a pure project-driven approach versus the rather strategy-driven approaches where we say we want EPSS as a concept being a major part of our knowledge transfer philosophy and strategy within the company on long term, where a crisp 6-week standard services will surely not be the right weapon to choose. This is something where we talk about a year or 2 of consistent guidance and services. Yeah, so as you see, the orange portion here ends up in one of the standard services, and at a certain moment in time, we end up in the blue area where we should rather focus on customized services. Yeah? If we differ a medium-sized single country company producing bicycles, would be very straightforward. And if we have a global player with all countries of the planet having to be taken into consideration for knowledge material delivery and shipment, this is nothing that you can do in 15 days, and this is nothing that happens in a specific time frame. This is something where you have to spend more time on a longer scale, and this is what the standard services will not be able to cover at that moment in time. We are going to move forward and creating a custom service for the particular customer based on our toolbox. So project-driven web EPSS, yeah, most likely a rather competitive situation, straightforward to deploy web assistant. A shelfware customer, sometimes Enable Now is bundled into a license deal and people just do not know what they got there. This is where the CEEs are coming into play. This is where we should focus on Explore, having a 5-day package of time to really make the customer understand what they got there and what they could do if they would do it properly. Yeah? So that's our starting point. Standard content only. We want to do book pages. We want to do handbooks, printed material, yeah, with average complexity, which is a bit explained down here. We go for deploy, and we have the full feature set, including EPSS with average complexity. We're going to go for deploy, core, and EPSS here. All the blue branches within the decision tree end up in a customized service where either you or the corresponding pre-sales colleagues will work together closely with the Enable Now service champions of your corresponding region to get a proper service tailored for the specific customer. So this is just a summary again for your reference. Just explaining again what I was just saying. If the web EPSS focus is there, this is what we have deploy web assistant for. Again, take care of in-scope and out-scope discussions here. This is most likely the most important part for that purpose. But that's just for your reference. Qualification tools, the decision tree as above. Service calculator is coming soon. This is what Jacco took, where Jacco van Zilk took the lead. So we're going to work on that. And then we have the pre-sales questionnaires and the compressed questionnaire, depending how close the single pre-sales resource is to the customer and the corresponding requirements. Let's have a closer look to the questionnaire. I linked them here, and I hope that link will work. Right now it's just thinking. I hope this won't make my PowerPoint crash. There we go. Enable Now pre-sales scoping checklist. That's the big one. It's just a more or less a set of questions to ask. So what are you looking for? Who should be able, where should the content be shipped to? How should the content be shipped? What content types are we having in scope? Yeah, what about your licensing? So which infrastructure components are in place? So if pre-sales would really give us all the data that is requested in here in that questionnaire, I believe that we have a very precise idea about the service volume that we have to offer. But most likely, that's probably too complex within a pre-sale situation. And therefore, we added another one called the compressed one, which simply asks basic questions as a starting point for the consultant to not being forced to repeat the questions again and again and again. For customized services, always try to get in touch with your Enable Now champion. The listing of the champions per region and their contact data, that's the last slide of the deck. You will have access to it. And in any case, if it's unclear, my recommendation is to offer Explore SAP Enable Now as a starting point, and then let you, the consultant, the knowledgeable person, qualify the concrete situation and requirement, and then add another X number of days to the service after Explore was actually delivered. I hope you all agree.
Yes.
That's good.
Silence.
So, qualification. But that was like the excursus towards pre-sales and the preparation of all this. Now let's go into the role model. So Enable Now the details, and the role model is the starting point. So what we expect to have standardized all over is the wording. Yeah? So we need proper wordings. There was project manager, there was project lead, there was master author as a synonym for all this, which leads to total confusion because no one actually knew who is who and who is in charge of what. And so what I actually did was just writing down in very short words what's actually the requirement from a organizational perspective on the other side, customer side. This is one that was one of the biggest feedbacks that we had, especially from the North American market. Yes, we come in as consultants, and there's this one guy in IT, rather thinking in IT terms. Yes, I have to implement a piece of software together with you guys. Yeah, but they had no clue that there is people that are needed to create content, to maintain content, that the subject matter experts have to be taken into consideration here. They have to be trained as well. All this needs a proper lead. Yeah? And this project lead is one of the mandatory roles that we require. And that's one of the mandatory roles that we're going to request from now on. A project lead in smaller situation, smaller projects and enterprises, probably all this might be consolidated into one person, but we need to be precise here in being able to divide between the single tasks and the single duties and the cooperation duties of the customer within the project. So project lead is the business owner, let's call it like this. Then we have a technical lead, which is the technological owner. In most cases, that might be the equivalent of the SAP Enable Now administrator. So the person that keeps the whole thing running and up on speed from a pure technological perspective, mostly not involved in the content production at all, just user management and interface management, all this. And then we have in the middle the master author or the master authors, the one person or the team that has the didactical hat on top. So knowing about media didactics, owning the design and the methodology, owning the resources, owning the templates, all this would be consolidated into this. Again, that's just roles. In real life, in average size projects, that might be just one person covering all of them, but that should be a starting point for the discussion to get the duties of the customer and especially the collaboration duties of the customer being clearly stated at a certain point early in the project. So customer core team, this is where we're going to refer to very often. And then we have the customer production team, probably in smaller project, that's still just that one person. The standard author working on predefined stuff, so not inventing the wheel again and again, but the core team defines how things should work, and standard authors are using those commitments and alignments to create and post-edit content. The subject matter experts, the people that really know what this all is about from a subject matter perspective, they are using the simple tools like Instant Producer or the web recorder. There is a very, very low minimal training effort here, but those people still need to be taken into consideration. And that's what we're going to summarize as the customer production team. Again, going back one slide, dividing core team ownerships within the customer ecosystem versus production team really being the hands within the project that do the content creation work. So this is rather creation. One back again, this is rather long-term maintenance and ownership within the customer's ecosystem. Besides that, and that was one missing point, we still have to have access to specific specialists in certain occasions. For instance, the e-learning courseware specialist, the one person that is in the academy team and has media didactical or instructional design knowledge to either act as an internal consultant within the project or being just a lead in there. But after line 2, 3, here it becomes important, authentication and authorization. That's specific people in the IT that we need to have access to. Database or application server administrators are probably different people as the technical lead. So the technical lead needs to orchestrate access to those resources. And this is again something that we're going to deal with in the preparation phase to really get the awareness on customer side, saying, hey, in that particular week or in those 2 weeks where the Enable Now consultant is in place, we need to have access to those people and have intense discussions going on to really get everything working smoothly afterwards. Design marketing specialists, if you have to have internal communications to validate your design approaches, etc. So that's all clear. One specific one, which is the application owners of the target applications, is new to us. This was never requested specifically in one of the older services, and this is what we made a mandatory part. We need to validate the recognition quality per application mandatorily. So within the strategy and configuration phase, there is a mandatory part where we have the recognition quality and the recognition capabilities, and especially the re-recognition capabilities for EPSS purposes as a to be documented mandatory part that was always a big hiccup. Sales sold Enable Now as the one and only recording tool that can record anything. Customer expected, hey, if it can record anything, then it will most likely be able to recognize anything. So I'm going to be able to use my EPSS carrier, whether web or desktop assistant, for each and every application in my universe. No, we have a PAM to rely on, a product availability matrix. And this is the point in time where the application owners come into play. Yeah, so we need to talk to those people. We need to have access to the application. We need to validate whether Enable Now is able to record and is able to re-recognize in a proper way. If that's not the case, we have to raise change requests. We have to create custom profiles. We have to probably find different approaches to fulfill the requirement of an overall EPSS landscape for that particular applications. And that was underrated so far. No? So we're going to add this as a mandatory part of the service to really validate this, and therefore we need to have access to the corresponding resources.
At what point does do we need to be speaking to the application owners? I would guess that would be right at the very start when we do the preparation phase, or is that during the the strategy phase?
In the preparation phase, we just announce that it's necessary and explain why, and then the customer has a certain time frame to get those people accessible, and then from the planning so far, it's part of the strategy and configuration phase, and there in the work stream, technology and infrastructure, that's basically the only mandatory part of that stream.
Okay, thank you.
So then we move to our end, our roles, the Enable Now consultant, conceptual work, the sequential part, the 4 sequential phases, the optional technical consultant, working closely together and being coordinated by the Enable Now consultant, but doing the pure technical work. And then potentially the Enable Now trainer that enables the customer production team in the green phase, in the enablement phase, based on the outcome of strategy and configuration. Again, all this might be the same person, but it could be different persons. So we have that possibility to distinguish here now. And it's obvious, so you can present this and say, hey, this is our team. And besides that, there is Enable Now support. And there we need to be very precise from now on. Yeah, so what is the support's duty and what is not? It's your job from now on to really get this this transition defined very sharp. Yeah? We're talking about malfunctions, we're talking about errors or bugs. That's what support is for. We talk about things like implementation of cloud-based identity management systems, connecting to the SAML provider or the foundation service of the customer. This is what support is mandatorily needed for. Yeah, but there should not be any conceptual questions posted to support anymore. Yeah, this is something that is A, charged, and B, something that the consultant can do, but support can't, for sure not. It will be easier when we all talk the same language, for sure. Yeah, so if this methodology is really a living one from now on, and we all talk about the same things in the same way, then it's easier for support. Nevertheless, the support department is not the longer workbench of consulting. That's a complete different thing. So we really need to take care here to really sharpen support's role to get pressure down on their end. So that's the role framework around it. Nothing new, nothing special. But however, let's go ahead. The objective of this, a mandatory phase, really consider it as mandatory, which is, at least from our recommendation perspective, delivered remotely, is something that happens between half a day and in more complex projects, probably up to 2 days, which is the purpose would be to prepare the customer IT and the customer core team, the business owners, of our solution for all the tasks that come up in strategy and configuration phase, to prepare them from a resource perspective and from an infrastructure perspective to everything that comes up, to avoid any delays in the early project. Yeah, so that was the finding so far. Unprepared customer, no one knew what to do. The consultant was sitting on the bench for the first 2 days. We already had an escalation before we even started. Yeah, this is exactly what this phase should compensate. There is a formal summary requirement. I'm not saying, and I will definitely not force you to create novels for each and every task you do, but at least a mail that summarizes this in bullet points. This is what we agreed on. This is what the requirement was. The checklist was handed over. The customer confirms, yes, we are going to prepare this for the planned day X where we start the service. Yeah, this will really give us the freedom to really start properly from the very beginning. So this is what it is about, and this is what it looks like from a flow perspective. So that's the same approach all the time. We have the phase, and if we go into the detailed decks per phase, you're going to see the either sequential or parallel flow of things that should take based on specific milestones. So in that case, as soon as the tenant is provisioned or the license contract is signed in the on-premise world, we can actually schedule the infrastructure overview session together with the customer's primary contact. So you ask the primary contact, hey man, we need in an on-premise scenario, for instance, we have to have access to the application server administrators. We have to have a server in place. So the responsible person for that should be in that call. We want to have the network person in the room that knows about the topology of the target networks. They need to understand the impact on their network ecosystem here properly. This is what happens in the infrastructure overview session. And then it might happen that this bunch of people says, yes, now we got it, but we need to prepare this a bit more intense. Yeah, especially the bigger the target infrastructure becomes. Yeah, so for global players like the Coca-Colas and the Walmarts of the world, the database administrator could be located on the southern Philippines, while the application owner is a Canadian guy. So we need to bring those people together and really set the awareness that this needs to happen. So this belongs together. Then we have the core team kickoff, which is basically the preparation of the more strategical, more conceptual work that takes place, and setting the awareness of what needs to be done in here. Those 2 blocks are mandatory. Recommendation, as mentioned earlier, is to deliver this as a standardized remote session. And then in case the technical implementation consultant is a different person as the Enable Now consultant, in that phase a handover to the technical person takes place, basically based on the commitments done in the first block, and then this can instantly start after the infrastructure overview session, just to make sure that the system is in an unconfigured, out of the box way, at least up and running at day 1 of the following strategy on configuration phase. Yeah, and this is where I expect a formal confirmation here that those required steps are executed. Okay, this again in short words. This is again the standard layout of the detailed decks per phase. We have the sessions, we have the scope, we have the audience, and we have a min-max duration for the core team, for the prep calls, and that's basically it. But now let's go into details. Yeah, so I'm going to stay here in the deck and now move to our accelerator repository. That is Learning Hub. And as always, the data is coming from there. And there is a group which will be posted or officially accessible somewhere next week. And this is where you will find yourself in a structure like this. the service package descriptions, and then one folder per phase. Let's go into the preparation phase first, and there you will find, this is how far we are right now, always a deck foreseen to use as a template for your core team kickoff in that case, or for the infrastructure overview session, and then a Word document that explains the delivery and the intention of it. So this is like the guideline for the consultant for that particular session, and the deck for the particular module within the phase, infrastructure overview and core team as examples. I PDF them. This is how we're going to ship the content from here. Since I'm now on my machine, I will open the PowerPoint, because there I'm a bit more flexible in moving forwards and backwards. So let me just open that for you, starting with the infrastructure overview session.
A nice picture. So with the Formula 1 car, we are much faster now, yeah?
Sure. It's all about the pictures. So infrastructure overview, there we go. Need to move over, swap presenter view with slideshow. There we go. So infrastructure overview, that would be your starting point. Yeah, you request the customer's primary contact. Hey, this is the person that we need. Yeah? There would probably be a 10-minute prep call in front, or in best case, pre-sales announce this necessity beforehand, and then we go through the infrastructure overview. Again, you know that slide already. Yeah? It's always setting the context within the service, so the counterparts on customer side will know where we are and what comes next. Overview of the stages, where we are in here, this is where we are. So this is all the same approach. It always says this is where we are, this is what comes next. And then what is Enable Now solution overview and components, and then this is slides that you will surely recognize. Yeah, so right now we're talking to the IT and support department of the customer, so the conceptual part, what is this for, is very crisp and lean. There is links everywhere. You know those slides, the content reuse, the multimodality, but this is just quickly explained, and then we go into technical details. So what is the solution about? What components does the solution come with? What different additions and variations are existing in case this is not defined at that moment in time? So you see, those decks are meant as templates for you. Yeah? No one forces you to use them from A to Z. In some cases, you have to delete or have to hide certain parts of it if that was set in the scope already. However, this is what it is for. The intention of that session is making the customer's infrastructure and customer teams aware of what they will have to do. And the single components, again, based on the roles that we previously discussed. A component demo for sure. There is a demo guideline in the delivery deck, focusing in that case rather on technology. So not features, not outputs that much, but more, hey, this is that tool, this is called producer, this is a rich client that needs this and that requirements, etc. So we only rather talk about infrastructural impact and technological impact here than we talk about the funny tools and features, the cool tools and features that we got. And then we go into details, infrastructures. What is the overall infrastructure of Enable Now from a server perspective, the technical overview, how are the single components stick together, which APIs are used, high-level technical overviews from a network perspective. There we can discuss encryption requirements. We can start to see whether we need specific network people in the place in the follow-up discussions or not. All this can happen based on those slides. And at any time where we have meaningful input in Info Center, this Info Center icon in the bottom right corner will appear. And this is where you still can take advantage of everything that Info Center already contains. Yeah, so this gives you a sequential flow of actions to take to prepare the customer teams properly. and at any time where there are detailed information available in InfoCenter. The InfoCenter deep link is linked to the bottom right corner. Yeah, and these decks are mandatorily handed over to the customer teams as soon as the session is over, so the customer team can probably prepare based on this deck, and there is nothing else they need. Going further, technical overview, you know all those slides most likely. What is actually Desktop Assistant doing? Explain a bit about the recognition technology. Network topology options, again, comparing on-premise world against the cloud world, seeing the limitations of each and everything, focusing on the fact that there is a firewall in between that needs to be aware of us, that there is some criticality here, that is to be discussed and tackled early enough in the project to at least being able to access the application properly from the very beginning. So making the customer team aware of what they need to do. Physically published content for global players. No? That's the next question that usually comes up at that point. Would we be able to use our own delivery infrastructure? Yes, sure, we are. We can do that, but it makes things a bit more complex. Infrastructure requirements, then we come to our famous security requirements that we got. That's one of the big ones that you should communicate early enough. Again, InfoCenter for details. Web Assistant, high-level perspective, what servers are involved, which URLs to be whitelisted mandatorily to be able to run the solution in a proper way. Again, InfoCenter. DNT MIME types to be cleared. No, the network people will be very interested in that. No, is this something proprietary, etc., etc., etc. And then we go down to concrete details, system requirement listings, and this is always the same approach. It says it summarizes things up here. If there is detailed information somewhere, like a subnode or whatever, it's linked, and you have the set, and they are not linked because that's always challenging. You have the help.sap.com documents that come into play at that specific moment in time down here. So this is where you point the people to. If you want to prepare yourself, look at the tables. This is what our requirements are, and if you want to go into details, the bottom side here, that's the set of documents that you should know, that you should be aware of.
Yeah, software dependencies must be already updated. Sorry, Mike.
Sorry again?
Regarding software dependencies on the previous slide must be updated. Yes, so Java runtime environment 8 is not mandatory any longer.
It's not mandatory, but as soon as we use the still JNLP, we still have the requirement going on.
No, CN launcher we have, so it doesn't require.
Yeah, if we have the launcher, but we have both.
Yeah, so.
GUI scripting and recording. Early point to the security scripting guide, and consider that as a showstopper. So you see the intention. I don't have to read all the slides for you, but this is the intention of that workshop, going through all the possible discussion points, crisp, and say, okay, the detailed discussions take place in the next phase, but we just need to make sure that you are aware of the requirements, cloud security assessments, where we get the data from, where's the trust center, what documents to read. On-prem server requirements, again, including the corresponding documents. Sizing recommendations, pointing to the sizing guide. Yeah, so this is, I believe, quite comprehensive. And then the blue tables, this is always the same layout, ends up in more or less a checklist, escalation to that component. Yeah, so get this done. If you struggle, you use support. So that's our approach. And I believe based on that, there shouldn't be any open questions afterwards anymore. And no one should actually complain anymore that they were not aware of what they had to do in the first phase of the service. always info center for the details, identity management. Again, a walkthrough. How do we play this identity management game? What's the best practice? Where is the user data coming from? That's a very interesting one in the early phase. Again, some authentication variants. Again, always comparing on-prem to cloud, seeing how IIS could come into play or not. Having more checklist-driven slides for single sign-on, for Cloud Connector, etc. So, but again, we don't have to go through this one by one. And then the support process, also one of the big missing links. How is this set up? And then all the links that are necessary to get the welcome mail sent to the right person, to identify the S user that is actually able to open tickets and get this managed early enough in the very beginning. Identify the power user in a big organization. That might already be a challenge. You all might have experienced that issue. Seeing the instructions how to create incidents if you don't know your S user, create an installation to be able to create tickets upon, etc. The release cycle, the component listing again, the release cycles, and finally all the high-level information sources as a link list again. So and this is just a perfect example of how the material will look like that we are going to provide. Infrastructure overview session. And the other side of the coin would be the core team. And therefore, we have another deck called Core Team Kickoff. Structure is similar, but it's not focusing on technology, it's focusing on concepts. Swap. So same approach, core team is kicked off. So in best case, you have your project lead, your technical lead, and the one master author in that call, plus the application owner of the target application, let's say, if it's a project-driven approach. Again, setting the context, where are we right now? So then asking, give us input, tell us about your project scope, your timeline, your milestones. This should all be just noted early enough and summarized in a not standardized way, but at least in an email. And then we go to the solution overview to really make the customer core team aware of what they actually purchased and what they can do with it. The basic intention of this deck is creation of decision readiness for the configuration and strategy phase. So the people that they have to bring into the room need to be able to take decisions on the didactical design, on the layout, on the configuration, etc., on the workflows, on the roles. But this is all stuff that you already know from the other deck. The extended solution demo is the heart of the core team kickoff, being a bit more content-driven, not technology-driven, as in the session before. Identifying info center as the one source of truth, pointing to the fact that they should really use it and get a user early enough. That's the most important slide in that deck, basically. Seeing Enable Now in the big scenario, seeing what Enable Now can do for the separate departments of a company, to trying to broaden the scope already very early, to identify, hey, this is not only the far too expensive screenshot tool that we have here. That's far more. And then the components that play together, all a bit facelifted, but you all know those slides already. Which tools are used for what purpose, what happens when, and the organization behind. And then you could always also start the discussion already at that point, the core team. The organizational pyramids, the percentage of workload if you are in a rather small organization with a one-man show, or a large enterprise, rather strategic, strategy-driven implementation. Independent country, market, whatever subsidiaries, just call it topic here, rather going for the internal service provider approach, where subject matter expert teams in the regions are for the single applications, they work together and provide content for a properly trained core team. Yeah? And all this works, designs, info center link, templates, info center link. Then impacts on the configuration, that one slide where you then can discuss all the areas that have to be discussed within the strategy and configuration phase. And they all have impact on our configuration. So what is a configuration and what impact factors do we have to this? So I believe, and then what comes next? Same approach as always, what comes in strategy and configuration. And then the final preparation checklist from the perspective of the business. What should you organize? Whom should you bring to the table? And what documents you should refer to as a preparation. So that's the 2 decks and the important links again. That's the 2 decks that set the pace for the rest of the project. And I believe this is already some value. So what's your opinion? Will that work for you? Is that material that you can work with?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I also think that will help a lot.
Yeah, very good.
So then we pretend that the technical preparation is executed. Always have to change this. So both IT personnel and business personnel is aware of what comes next. They have their material, they probably read the one or the other standard document, and they are aware of what decisions to be taken. Technical prep calls in preparation of the technical implementation took place. So we move over to the technical implementation phase, which is basically a parallel stream of actions to take. In best case remotely, but as mentioned earlier, in high secure environments or government or whatever, this will not be feasible, but it's always meant as a recommendation.